Warning, the following podcast contains explicit language that may not be suitable for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Another run's going to score as the Braves cannot secure the strikeout. It is 10-0 St. Louis in the first inning.
Carnival of errors here now for the Braves.
Be a good guy to talk to after this game. There it is. The St. Louis Cardinals advance to the NLCS. The Cardinals beat the Braves in Game 5, 13-1.
Eighth pitch has been the magic one tonight. This time he hits the ball to deep right field. Cody Bellinger has done it, and the Dodgers lead in Game 7. Towering fly ball. The Dodgers come from behind in the series. They come from behind in Game 7, and they win the National League pennant.
2 years, two heartbreaking disappointments. Both times the Braves fell with the knowledge that this was a chance wasted. Another year of a possible window closing. In 2021, the Braves looked for another year of running through the NL East and another run at the trophy, but 2021 was not run-of-the-mill for the NL East Titans. Welcome into Against All Odds, Against All Comers, a one-shot podcast about the improbable run of the 2021 Braves to secure a World Series title. I'm Eric Edmondson, and I will be your host throughout. We open with the 2019 and 2020 losses, respectively, that the Braves suffered against the Cardinals and the Dodgers. The Cardinals go on to lose the eventual 2019 World Series champion Washington Nationals in the NLCS, and the Dodgers would go on to win the contentious 2020 COVID bubble World Series. After a year without fans and a year that felt like getting hit in the gut with a bowling ball, the Braves looked to retool heading into 2021, and one of the things that needed to be addressed was the starting rotation. Luckily, there was a veteran free agent with playoff experience looking for a home, and so in November, the Braves signed Charlie Morton, a two-time All-Star and at the time a one-time World Series champion, to a one-year deal. More moves on the margins were made. Guillermo Heredia off waivers along with Ede Adrianza were both picked up. The Braves also looked to bring back a powerhouse in their lineup, Marcelo Zuna, on a long-term deal, and they were able to sign him. One of the more stranger moves in the offseason was choosing to non-tender Adam Duvall, making him a free agent. Duvall had been with the team since 2018 and was vital in the team's success in 2020. But among all the free agents and pickups throughout the offseason, one thought remained on everyone's mind. When will the Braves sign Freddie Freeman to a lifetime extension? Freeman had been with the team since 2010, entering the 2021 season. He was on his last year of his 8-year deal. Freeman at the time was the face of the franchise. He had been with the team all through the rebuild and had been excellent, and was named in the same breath as Hall of Famer and Braves immortal Chipper Jones. Freeman was a massive deal, and people wondered if this in fact would be his last season in Atlanta. This storyline would loom over the entire season. The other storyline, however, was Ronald Acuna Jr., who everyone had consensus as a perennial MVP candidate. He was looking to have another monster year after he nearly hit 40-40 in the last full season in 2019. Before the season even began, though, the Braves were hit with a pair of devastating losses. On January 18, 2021, beloved radio broadcaster and former player Don Sutton passed away at the age of 75. This was tough for me personally, as Don Sutton was one of the people who inspired me to become a broadcaster. Hearing his voice crackle through the radio on summer drives with my dad will always be one of the most precious memories to me. A tough loss for Braves country, but they had little time to mourn as 4 days later news broke that not only saddened Atlanta, but saddened the entire nation.
Across this country, the nation celebrating the life of Hall of Famer Hank Aaron, a rare legend among legends. He became baseball's home run king, the first to break Babe Ruth's record, a champion of civil rights on and off the field.
Hank was an icon, and to many people, myself included, the true home run king. Hank was not only one of the greatest players of all time, but was instrumental in outreach and community for the Braves. Many members of the team regularly talked to Hank as he remained loved. The team had a sort of memorial service for Hank as they opened up the stadium for fans to come in and pay their respects at the Monument Garden in Truist Park, where the statue of Hank sits. This was a massive deal for the people of Atlanta. April. The Braves got through spring training and shipped up to Philadelphia for opening day. With all the expectations coming in, the Braves would lose Game 1 on a walk-off and start the season under 500. A mark and a number that the team and the fans will remember for a very long time. More signs of a possible cursed season happened on April the 3rd. MLB had decided to pull the All-Star game from Atlanta among Georgia voting law controversy. The event would have been a huge boost to the local economy and a huge boost to the Braves organization, who had underdelivered on their promises to Cobb County following the opening of Truist Park, formerly known as SunTrust Park. And on top of all of it, the Braves were swept in the opening series, starting the year 0-3. And by the end of April, they were 12-14, 2 games under 500. The lineup looked asleep, and the pitching couldn't pitch, and the Braves just could not find a way to win games. But one person in the lineup who was no slouch was, in fact, Ronald Acuna Jr., who bombed 8 home runs in April and was looking like an MVP indeed. The team would continue to hover around 500, and at the end of April, they took a trip to the Bronx to do battle with the Yankees, and although it was a series split, there was something very significant about this series, and that has to do with Braves third baseman Austin Riley. Riley came up in 2019 and showed immediate power potential. Unfortunately, like most power hitters, he struggled with strikeouts so much that he lost him his starting job in 2020, and was even losing it in moments in 2021. But in Yankee Stadium, Austin Riley truly arrived, and the funny thing is, he didn't even get a hit. Let me explain. In the 9th inning, in Game 1 of this 2-game series, Austin was locked in a battle with the Cuban missile Aroldis Chapman, and as every baseball fan knows, Chapman is known for one thing, the fastball. Here, Austin saw a lot of them and continued to fight them off. Fastballs and sliders, a steady diet, and the battle eventually ended, ironically, with a fly ball to the track of the short porch in right field. In Game 2, however, Austin was cleared for takeoff. This began the emergence of the Braves' next stalwart, Austin Riley. Even with the lineup trying to come together, the Braves still couldn't find a way to win and ended up with a record, of course, under 500 going into the month of May. A rough start to the season, but nothing that a team who has won 3 straight division titles and made a deep playoff run a year prior can't handle. May. Well, in May, they looked like they could turn around, and on May 8th, they had a comeback game of the year contender versus the Phillies at home in Truist, and this was the type of win that you think will shock the systems awake. Late clutch home runs and everyone on the bench contributing in some way, shape, or form. And again, it was from the players that no one expected. Pablo Sandoval, in the twilight of his career, hit a 2-run bomb to send the game to extras.
Close games, late inning walks. Let's see if Sandoval can bring the Braves back from the brink. Swing and a high fly ball, right center field, headed to the bullpen. Pablo! Well, there's pandemonium here right now.
The Phillies would continue to score and gained a 1-run lead on the Braves. Then Ede Adrianza and Christian Pache would tie the game up with a swinging bunt. Jacob Webb would come out of the pen to work, and things did not go well. Once a touted prospect, Webb found a way into the Braves bullpen, and after getting it to extras, he was the last man up. Philly loaded up the bases, and Webb found himself alone in the middle of the diamond.
Ground ball back toward the middle. They're coming home. The throw is wide. 1 run's in. Here comes McCutchen. Nobody's covering home. He scores. The Phillies take a 2-run lead.
The Braves had to now overcome a 3-run deficit with 3 outs to go, and here we see the role players step up in a big way. Future Milwaukee Brewers star William Contreras stepped up with the bases loaded and was able to guide a ball down the line for a tie game once again. Still looking for the win, Ede Adrianza would find himself in a position to walk it off, and, well...
Ede Adrianza with a chance to be the hero. Who'd have thunk it?
Driven to right field, that ball is down, and the Braves have won it. The chase is on. Ede Adrianza, and the Braves somehow, some way, win this one in 12. What a game!
A victory that everyone looked at and hoped for a reborn Brave squad who would turn things around, and while they did have an over 500 record in the month of May, it still wasn't enough to get the overall over that mark. One more thing before we put May away. Marcell Ozuna. The prized free agent had not found his form yet in 2021, And in Boston, the slugger went down with multiple dislocated fingers after sliding into third base. A day later, after Ozuna flew home, he was arrested on domestic violence charges after he was found in his home physically assaulting his wife. Not only was Marcell out for a few months with an injury, now his season and career were up in the air. And it was an outfield that was being propped up by the greatness of Ronald Acuna Jr. Both Marcell and center fielder prospect Christian Pache had struggled mightily. This was a kick to the gut of Braves country, as Atlanta had to go to damage control and try to ignore the Ozuna issues while cooperating with MLB's investigation. So with the MVP favorite in the outfield, a spotty rotation and bullpen, they found themselves barely hovering in second place over the Phillies and behind the Mets, two teams on paper that were nowhere near the prowess of Atlanta. Thankfully, the Mets hadn't run away with the division, so it was still very much up for grabs. June, however, yielded the same result as April, a losing record. July. An under 500 team would look to reset and retool as the All-Star break and trade deadline loomed, and who would headline the All-Star game that would now be in Colorado other than Ronald Acuna Jr., whose star power was now getting recognized by all fans. There was one last series to play before the break, however, and that would take place in Miami against the Marlins. The Marlins and Ronnie have had a tumultuous relationship, to say the least. When he came up as a rookie, he was thrown at by them multiple times, and that would continue even into the 2021 season. So every time he played them, everyone watched to see if they would respond to the numerous times that he had run the scoreboard on them. In Game 2 of the series, nothing happened between the two. No retaliation, no staring, nothing. Clean competition. The Braves looked as though they were about to cruise to victory with ease. Then Jazz Chisholm hit a high fly ball to right, where Ronald would look to chase it down, and the ball took him to the warning track. Ronald leapt for the ball and immediately went down into the dirt.
He jumps on the first pitch, drives that toward Acuna, who leaps and can't come up with it. He lands awkwardly on the warning track. He's down on the turf. Freddie Freeman saying it's the knee, an awkward leap by Acuna, who mistimed his jump. Chisholm comes all the way around to score, but that's secondary to the health of Ronald Acuna Jr. Acuna now sitting prone near the right field foul line between the first base bag and right field, and tears streaming down his face.
Watching it, I was in immediate denial of the situation. Watching your best player and a generational talent try to walk, let alone stand with tears streaming down their face, is heartbreaking. It's those moments in sports where we get to see the real people behind the superhero facade. Ronnie had to be carted off the field and went directly to get imaging done to the right knee, and it was later revealed that Ronald Acuna Jr. would miss the rest of the season with a complete tear of his right ACL. The Braves would have to continue on without their star. The trade deadline.
See some moves yesterday too. Jock Peterson going over to the Atlanta Braves.
5 days later, the Braves would acquire 2021 World Series champion and former Dodger and former Cub, Jock Peterson, in an effort to rebuild the depleted outfield. When Jock got to Atlanta, someone in the locker room told him something to the effect of, "Don't get too comfortable, you might get traded again." And who could deny that sentiment? The Braves were well under 500, just lost their star player, and were watching teams begin to grow a gap in the division lead, with the first place Mets sitting 4.5 games above the field. Peterson never took this same feeling. He always felt as though he would end up in Atlanta when he became a free agent last offseason. And Jock wasted no time becoming a fan favorite in the A. He came through with some really clutch hits and was starting to show that this stagnant team still had life in them. The strange season wasn't finished yet, though. From July 22nd to August 1st, they would trade wins and losses back and forth. One night was a win, the next a loss, and repeat that for 6 more games. In the midst of all of that was the trade deadline on July 30th. The Braves had moves to make, and while the casual baseball fan may only know their GM, on this day, everyone in baseball would learn to know the name Alex Anthopoulos. In total, the Braves acquired 3 outfielders, Adam Duvall, Eddie Rosario, and Jorge Soler. All were acquired for 3 pieces from 3 separate teams: Alex Jackson, Pablo Sandoval, and Casey Kalick. These players are either in the minors or retired in the case of Pablo Sandoval. The pieces were now in place for a run at glory. The alternating wins and losses went in on April 4th in St. Louis as the Braves claimed a series win over the Cardinals and were back to an even 500 mark once again. They would go for the sweep the next day to get over the 500 mark for the first time in 2021.
1-1 pitch is popped up. Foul ground. Freddie is there. How sweep it is. The Braves are over 500. Brian Snitker, yeah, wow indeed. 2 great comeback wins for Atlanta in as many nights.
The division chase. The Braves now had tunnel vision on the division, and after the St. Louis series, they sat 2.5 games behind the Mets in 3rd place. It was time for a run. From August 6th to the 22nd, the Braves went 13-2 and made the most out of the soft part of their schedule. And all during that, on August 15th, the Braves overtook the Phillies and sat atop the NL East on a razor's edge. By this point, the Mets had imploded, and it was a 2-horse race between Atlanta and Philadelphia. Into September, where there was one last big hurdle for the Braves, and that was the West. The NL West for a good part of the year was a 3-horse race between San Diego, Los Angeles, and the surprising San Francisco squad. LA and San Francisco would eventually win 100-plus games, and the Braves had to go play them in their houses, and they went 1-5. Swept in LA and a series loss in the Bay. Something to note, though, is that Eddie Rosario was starting to get hot. The outfielder was traded while on the injured list and began to swing a hot stick against the Giants, and he even hit a cycle in Oracle Park. The second leg of the West Coast trip was against the lowly Diamondbacks and the Padres, the big opponent being the Friars. The Braves walked into Petco and swept San Diego, eliminating them from the playoffs and setting up the biggest series of the year back home against the Phillies with the division on the line. This was it. A sweep wins the division. The first game was started by Charlie Morton, the veteran acquisition who had been a revelation in the rotation, and he had led them to a 2-1 slim victory. Game 2 was Max Fried's time to shine, and he had been on a roll since the All-Star break and showed what kind of ace potential he had to offer coming off a 9-inning shutout of the Padres his last time out. After that victory, that left just one last game to play against the two foes on September 30th. Meanwhile, across the country in Houston, the Astros played the Rays, needing one victory to clinch their own division. Game 3 of the series was started by Ian Anderson, who had been very good for the Braves in the 3 spot in the rotation. The rookie who came up in 2021 had a huge role to fill, and he looked to do just that. Ian would fire 6 shutout innings, getting pulled in the 7th after surrendering a pair, but the offense had his back. In the bottom of the very first inning, Jorge Soler, who was acquired at the deadline, launched a leadoff home run and gave the Braves the lead. A lead they would not relinquish. Then Austin Riley would go yard and put the Braves up 3-0. Things were starting to take shape. The Phillies would try to climb back after 2 solo homers, but by the time we got to the 9th inning, it was 5-3 Braves, and Will Smith was on to close out the game. Go to any Braves fan and ask them about the Will Smith experience, and they will detail to you horror stories of nearly blown leads and heart attacks. But from this night forward, Will Smith was locked in. But of course, we didn't know that yet. Smith was on against McCutchen, Gregorius, and Ronald Torreyes. McCutchen struck out, 1 out away. Gregorius popped out, 2 away. The one batter standing in the way of victory was Ronald Torreyes, and
the 0-2 pitch. He got it! Against all odds, against all comers, the Braves are the champions of the National League East for the 4th straight year.
October. The Braves climbed a once insurmountable mountain and defended the East. I was personally at this game, and it was the loudest environment I have ever been in, and I was in the nosebleeds. At the same time across the country, the juggernaut Astros just finished off the race to secure another AL West Division title. In round 1 of the National League Division Series, the Braves would face a scarily similarly constructed team to the 1990s Braves, the Milwaukee Brewers. The Brewers were built off their starting pitching, namely Cy Young winner Corbin Burns, Brandon Woodruff, and Freddie Peralta. Nicknamed the Law Firm, this rotation was a big contributor in betting against the Braves going into the series. After all, the Braves had just won 88 games. They barely scratched out a win in a lowly division. The Braves starting pitching of Fried, Morton, and Anderson seemed to pale in comparison to the prowess of Milwaukee. But you've probably heard this term a lot, and it rings true in this series and throughout the tournament, and that's getting hot at the right time. Atlanta had won 12 of their last 14 coming into the playoffs, so they were red hot. And not to discredit that lineup, which still had studs like Freeman, Albies, and Riley, but the additions were helping. Soler, Duvall, and Rosario all had gotten hot. Peterson, the first to be acquired, was benched to start the series. So Game 1 ensues, and it was a pure pitching duel between Morton and Burns. Both starters were dealing until the Brewers broke through with a late 7th inning Rowdy Tellez 2-run home run, so the Braves were now down 2-0, and looking at facing a game-down deficit in a 5-game series. In the 8th inning, Brian Snitker decided to bring out Jock Peterson and send him to the plate. Jock has garnered a reputation of being clutch, especially in October, earning the name Jocktober. The Braves would get their first taste of that in this game as he would launch a solo shot to left field to make a 1-run game. A 1-run game that the Braves would end up losing, and frankly, this team that was going to depend on its offense looked like they had just met their match. A super team of pitching now had them down 1-0 in the series. Game 2 was a very similar style in the pitcher's duel. This time, it was Fried and Woodruff. But this time, the Braves got on top quickly with the 2 runs in the first from 2 doubles provided by Freddie and Ozzie. Max Fried would also twirl a gem, 6 innings of shutout ball with 9 strikeouts. Austin Riley tacked on late with a solo shot, making it 3-0 as the Braves cruised to a Game 2 victory. Both teams would hop on a flight to the south as the Braves had the opportunity to wrap up the series at home. Both offenses were asleep in this contest. Well, even the entire series, as both pitching staffs were excellent, which surprised many as the Braves had been overlooked in not only the rotation, but the bullpen as well. Ian Anderson started against Freddie Peralta, and the two traded zeros until the 5th inning, when Adrian Hauser came on in relief as the Braves had worn down the 3rd member of the law firm. Travis d'Arnaud singled, then Dansby Swanson, leading to the 9 spot in the lineup. Remember, this is the 2021 season, a year before the universal DH would be implemented, and Brian Snitker pulled the trigger again for his secret weapon off the bench, Jock Peterson. On a 1-2 count with 2 runners on, Hauser challenged Peterson on a high fastball, and
to right field. Garcia going back, looking up, it is gone! A blast! Pitch hit, 3-run home run for Jock Peterson, and the Atlanta Braves are on top, 3-0. His second pinch hit home run of this NLDS.
Peterson trotted around the diamond as Jocktober officially arrived in Atlanta, and bouncing around his neck was something that shocked a lot of people. Pearls. Big white pearls, like for women. Well, Jock was insistent on these pearls, and since he debuted them on September 29th, he carried an OPS over 900. So, I guess they're working. 3 was all the Braves would need in this game, as a bullpen of Chavez, Matzik, Jackson, and Smith held the Brewers down. Atlanta was 1 win away from going back to the NLCS. Game 4, Charlie Morton would start on short rest, and for 3 innings, the veteran shoved, but then he ran into trouble in the 4th, allowing 2 runs. 2-0 Milwaukee. But not for long, as Eddie Rosario had his first October heroics and sent home 2 on a bloop base hit. In the top of the 5th, the Braves would open the bullpen and send out Huascar Ynoa, who looked to bridge the game to where the big guns could take over. Well, unfortunately, the bullpen suffered their first blemish as Rowdy Tellez, again, blasted another 2-run home run, making it 4-2 Brewers. Just like in the inning prior, however, the Braves answered right back and manufactured 2 runs. Tie game. Both teams were in the good parts of their respective bullpens, and it was now a staring contest. For 2 2/3 innings, both teams were scoreless until the bottom of the 8th when Josh Hader came on looking for a 2-inning hold at the very least. The lefty closer for years had been one of, if not the most dominant arm out of the pen, and he showed it, striking out both Rosario and Swanson. It would be a favorable lefty-on-lefty matchup between Hader and the pillar and face of the Braves franchise, Freddie Freeman. And on the very first pitch, Hader hung a slider.
The Brewers in a shift. It's a fly ball to center field. Lorenzo Cain going back at the wall. Freddie Freeman's left the yard and put the Braves on top in the bottom of the 8th. With a solo shot to left center, they lead it 5-4 in Game 4 of the NLDS.
The Braves were just 3 outs away from a trip to the NLCS. The bullpen door swung open again and out jogged Will Smith, and with a 1-run lead, everyone in Braves country collectively sighed as the leadoff man would reach via a single. But next batter, pop out. Batter after that, strikeout. Then steps in former MVP Christian Yelich, and Will Smith sat him down on 3 pitches. The Braves for the second straight year were going to the NLCS, and their opponent, the same from last year, the reigning World Series champion, the 106-win super team Dodgers. Even with the win differential being a conversation, you could tell this would be a powerhouse matchup between the 2 best in the National League. In Game 1, the Dodgers would look to patch together a bullpen game while the Braves would give the nod to Max Fried. Before this series, however, the Braves would have to send Jorge Soler to the 10-day COVID restriction list, so he wouldn't be available until Game 5 of the series at the very least. That is, if Atlanta made it to that point. In Game 1, Atlanta would strike first off a wild pitch, allowing Eddie Rosario, now batting leadoff in the absence of Jorge Soler, to score. The Dodgers would also strike as Chris Taylor would single in the second, and 2 innings later, in the fourth, catcher Will Smith would clobber a ball to left, giving the Dodgers a 2-1 lead. Austin Riley would say, not so fast, as he launched his own solo shot, tying up the game at 2. Max Fried would make it through 6 innings, and in the 7th, here comes the cavalry. Matzik, Jackson, and Smith would hold the Dodgers' potent lineup and give the Braves a chance in the bottom of the 9th. After a strikeout, Albee singled. He then stole second, a runner in scoring position for Austin Riley. The third baseman looked like the future in a franchise where third base was helmed by Chipper Jones for years. The Braves felt that they had found their next guy at the position, and he's had an incredible year. He's gone deep tonight, and this is his moment.
2-game bottom of the 9th. Riley line drive, that is down! A base hit! Here comes Albies, and the Atlanta Braves win Game 1!
Atlanta had ripped Game 1 away from LA in a pressure-filled fashion. Ian Anderson would take the ball the next day, and in the very first inning, he would give up a 2-run bomb to Corey Seager. 2-0 Dodgers early. Opposing him was future Hall of Famer Max Scherzer, who had been traded to the Dodgers at the deadline and had already been used in a great deal of postseason matchups by LA manager Dave Roberts. He stifled the Braves through 3 innings and innocently walked Austin Riley in the 4th. It seemed harmless, but Scherzer and the Dodgers must have forgot what month it was. Jocktober.
Against Milwaukee is all the Braves needed to secure a win, a 3-run homer. And that one's hit high and deep, way back. Jock Peterson sends it out. We are tied.
Peterson against his former team sent a ball 454 feet to the chop house, all while wearing the pearls and beating his chest, saying, "I'm a bad motherfucker." The fever of pearls in Atlanta was something special. Everyone had them. Women, kids, frat boys, midlife crisis dads, and even Braves legend Dale Murphy pulled a strand of pearls out of his pocket and put them on as he threw the ceremonial first pitch in this game. Fast forward to the 7th inning, and Tyler Matzik worked himself into some trouble, allowing 2 runners on via an intentional walk. Luke Jackson would come on in relief and gave up a 2-run double, and this late into the ballgame, giving the Dodgers a clear path to splitting in Atlanta before going home to a hostile Dodger Stadium for games 3, 4, and 5. The Braves would be quiet for an inning, but in the 8th, Eddie Rosario stepped in, and here, 2 Braves legends would begin to get their full recognition. Eddie would single, then on a very gutsy play, take second on a shallow fly ball out from Freddie Freeman. He's in scoring position. With Ozzie Albies at the plate, something was cooking. Ozzie singled on a shallow ball to right field, and Rosario got the green light from longtime Braves third base coach Ron Washington. Washington, who is the manager for the Texas Rangers, was 1 strike away from 2 separate World Series championships, and he wasn't about to be stopped by a base runner here. The windmill was on all the way as Rosario motored around third. The throw comes in from right. Play at the plate. The ball is dropped. Rosario scores after the go-ahead from Wash. On the play, Ozzie was able to move to second, putting the bat in the hands of Austin Riley. A homer and a walk-off last night, and tonight, an opportunity to tie the game. On the very first pitch, Austin delivered.
Marias deals, Riley in the air, center field. That ball's got some heat on it, and it is over the head of the center fielder Betts. Always around third, throw to the plate, and we are tied.
The Braves were not saying die. They were not going down easily. In the top of the 9th, Will Smith came on and did the job, 3 up, 3 down. Another chance for a walk-off for the Braves. After a bunt and a ground out, Dansby Swanson was able to get to second as Eddie Rosario climbed in, and once again, the Braves ambushed the Dodgers on the first pitch.
Eddie Rosario, 3 hits tonight against Kenley Jansen. And first ball swinging. Oh, and it gets through! And here comes the winning run! Swanson scores, and the Braves win again in their final at-bat!
Atlanta would take a 2-0 lead in the NLCS over the Dodgers for the second time in as many years, and they had also guaranteed themselves at least one more game in Atlanta. Game 3 was another instant classic. The Dodgers took an early 2-0 lead on another Corey Seager 2-run bomb, and the Braves wouldn't be able to respond until the 4th, where, with a lot of patience, grit, and a little bit of luck, they plated 4 runs, moving themselves in front 4-2. The Braves bullpen had to cover some innings in this game, starting in the 6th with A.J. Minter, then in the 7th it was Tyler Matzik, and then in the 8th it was Luke Jackson. These Power 3 pitchers were the backbone of the bullpen along with closer Will Smith. They have been infallible to this point in the playoffs, but in just one inning, that was going to change. The Dodgers put 2 on against Jackson, and with 1 away for Cody Bellinger. The lefty slugger had an extreme down year in 2021, but was starting to show signs of life in the playoffs. If you remember back to the opening, we've heard his name before. Bellinger effectively ended the Braves' playoff run just a year ago with a bomb to put the Dodgers on top in Game 7 of the NLCS. A home run here wouldn't win the series for LA, nor lose it for Atlanta. But what have I said before about getting hot at the right time?
He's at the plate representing the tying run here in the 8th inning. And he sends one high and deep. Way back right center field. We are tied. Cody Bellinger strikes again.
The game was tied, and after Snicker thought the Dodgers had seen Luke Jackson enough, he pulled him for veteran Jesse Chavez. Now, Jesse is a name that will be talked about in Brave circles for a long time, but here it wasn't his best moment.
And Betts into right center, and it is down, a base hit. Taylor scores. Betts on his way to second, and the Dodgers have the lead in the 8th.
The Braves would go on to lose Game 3, and for many in Braves country, this felt like deja vu. In 2020, they had won the first 2 games while going on to lose the third, and the same as this year. Going up 3 late into the game with how rock solid the bullpen had been, You had to feel confident. Step on the neck of the Dodgers right now before they wake up, and after that bomb, it felt like they had woken up. With momentum squarely in the corner of Los Angeles, the next game would be a bullpen one for Atlanta, while the Dodgers turned to Julio Urias. The Braves torched him. Eddie Rosario smacked a solo shot, Adam Duvall went yard, Freddie freaking Freeman hit a yacker, and Jock Peterson singled, giving Atlanta a 4-0 lead. In the fifth, they added on 5-0 now. The Dodgers would put on a few to make it a 3-run game, but by that time the ball was in the hands of the bullpen. This game was over, but adding insult to injury, the Braves would cause a blowout. Freddie hit a ground rule double, scoring Dansby, and then Eddie Rosario, needing a triple to complete the cycle, deposits a ball into the visitors' bullpen for a 3-run home run. 9-2 Braves is your final. The Braves were now up 3-1 in the series. The same margin as 2020 when they lost 3 straight games and choked away the pennant. Game 5, you had to feel good going in as a Braves fan. The offense just erupted in the previous game, and you would have Max on the mound. Well, it looked like the Braves might be celebrating on SoCal soil, as in his hometown, Freddie Freeman crushed a 2-run shot, giving Atlanta the early lead. Those 2 would be the last runs of the game for the Braves. The Dodgers would shell Max Fried, as he was only able to go 4 2/3 innings. The rest of the game was just a Dodgers fest as they blasted the pitching staff for 11 runs. The Braves would take a 3-2 series lead back to Atlanta, and the narrative talk started again. I haven't addressed this until now because it just wasn't pertinent. The city of Atlanta was cursed. This wasn't just a local thing. This was nationally known. The Hawks have never made an NBA final at the time of this recording. The Atlanta Thrashers were taken away from Georgia for being too bad. Atlanta United did win the MLS Cup in their first year, but since it's MLS, they unfortunately don't get as much press. And of course, the biggest reason for the curse, the Falcons' infamous 28-3 choke in the Super Bowl. The Braves were up against that curse. They fell victim to it 2 years in a row, and after a loss like that, people started talking again. And as I said, this isn't local, this isn't fan conspiracy. This was brought up in the Game 5 post-game conference with Freddie Freeman.
Freddie, you guys don't want to hear about last year or 28-3 or any of Atlanta sports history, but at the same time, do you guys have to kill that narrative like you did the Division Series narrative last year?
I mean, that's going to be the narrative, it seems, because every day it's brought up the last couple of days, so I don't think we have a choice until we kill that narrative. We're up 3-2 and we're going home. It's a great position to be in.
Freddie was right. 3-2 going back home to your ballpark is a great spot to be in. However, there was still work to be done in order to advance. The travel day between games was agonizing as a Braves fan. Being online between games was like waiting for a bomb to go off. The narrative was circling, and while you want to be confident about your team, objectively the Dodgers were a better squad, and over the past 3 games in LA, they showed a lot of fight from all parts of their lineup. Was midnight about to strike? In Game 6, it would be Ian Anderson versus Walker Buehler. Buehler wasn't supposed to start this game. It was meant to be Max Scherzer. He was in line to start, but prior to this game, he said to manager Dave Roberts that he can't start because he was suffering from dead arm. He had been used too much. So Walker Buehler on short rest would start Game 6. Ian Anderson was exactly what the Braves needed. He stifled the Dodgers lineup through 3 innings, and after an Austin Riley RBI double in the bottom half of the first, the Braves were up by a skinny 1-run margin. In the fourth, the Dodgers would tie it up on a weak ground ball from Cody Bellinger, and that tied the game at 1. The Braves would need to answer back, but after Peterson and Swanson got out to start the inning, things looked bleak. Travis d'Arnaud walked, bringing up the 9th spot in the order. It had only been 4 innings, but Snitker smelt blood in the water, and pinch hit for his pitcher only through 4 innings and turned to Eddie Adrianza. Adrianza was able to steer a cutter down the right field line, and there were runners on the corners with 2 away for Eddie Rosario. Rosario coming in was hitting above 500. He already had a base hit tonight. He was hot at the right time, but here they were 2 outs away, with the Braves turning to a taxed bullpen the next inning. The first 2 pitches Eddie swung and missed. He was down 0-2. Next pitch, foul ball, ball, foul, foul. By this point, Buehler was gassed. Short rest and long innings had the pitcher running on fumes. Buehler came set with the 1-2 pitch. Fires the 5th cutter in the sequence. Bang.
Rosario, deep to right. It is gone! A 3-run blast! Eddie Rosario keeps his dream postseason alive.
The Braves took a 4-1 lead. Eddie had made history tying the record for most playoff hits in a single series. Eddie traded from Cleveland at the deadline for Pablo Sandoval, who was promptly released by the Cleveland Ball Club, and Eddie was injured. One of the most insignificant moves on paper that no one looked at close enough may have just sent the Braves to the World Series. The rally would end there, and Atlanta, with a 3-run lead, turned to A.J. Minter, who was brilliant out of the pen, getting 2 clean innings. In the 7th, Luke Jackson's name would be called. Jackson had been dragged online after giving up the 3-run bomb in Game 3, and Jackson is someone who is online a good bit. He saw the hate, he saw the tweets, he saw the comments. He was looking for redemption. He wouldn't find it. A leadoff double and a walk put 2 on for A.J. Pollock, who doubled, scoring 1 and moving runners to 2nd and 3rd with still no one out. No. Here we go. Same old Braves. Here comes the choke. Luke's night was over. As he went into the dugout, the camera stayed on him. He wasn't angry. He didn't throw his glove. He didn't yell. He just went to the end of the bench, put his head in his hands. Luke was the longest tenured member of the Braves bullpen, so long that he had pitched in Turner Field. This was home for him, and in the span of a week, his home had turned on him, and in his head, he had no one to blame but himself. Tyler Matzek was called upon to enter. The journeyman reliever was about to pitch the most important spot in his entire career. Matzek, drafted by the Rockies, quickly fell out of the big leagues after he caught the yips. The yips, for those uninitiated, is a condition for pitchers, but really all athletes, where they just can't do anything. Everything that used to be effective suddenly isn't. Matzek lost his location, and everything he did throw over the plate was clobbered. Tyler was out of baseball for years, but with the help of a retired Marine and his wife's endless support, he gave the game another shot. The Braves signed him and now turned to him in the most pivotal spot for the franchise in the past 20 years. Let's reset the scene. 2 on, no one out. 1 already in. 2-run lead. The first batter up would be the most prolific hitter of this generation, the machine, Albert Pujols. A shell of his former self at this point, but still had a lot of power against left-handers like Matzek was. Matzek set him down on 4 pitches.
Jackson's 2 runners still out there. Can't bear to watch. Here's a 1-2 and a swing and a miss. That was a big strikeout for Matzek.
Next up, Steven Souza Jr. Slider, fastball. On the 4th pitch, Matzek kicked and fired and burned 99 on the corner to set down Souza.
1 out, 1-2. A called strike 3. Matzek burns off the edge.
2 away. But now you go to the top of the lineup, where a player that destroyed the Braves a year prior awaited. A former MVP, Mookie Betts. This would be the toughest out of the night. First pitch, fastball, 97. Betts didn't move. Second pitch, fastball, 97. Betts frozen again. Matzek was 1 strike away from striking out the side with 2 runners in scoring position. Matzek looked into his catcher d'Arnaud. Betts stared down Matzek. The big lefty kicked, fired.
Got him, swinging strike 3. Unbelievable. off the field. And he limits the damage.
Tyler Matzik just immortalized himself in Braves history. Walking through the dugout, there were high fives and back pats, but waiting at the end of the tunnel of his teammates was his bullpen mate, Luke Jackson. Tyler had just gotten his friend out of it, and the two shared a hug. Matzik would go out for the 8th inning with the whole crowd behind him. 1, 2, 3. The Braves were 3 outs away from the World Series. Will Smith comes out of the pen. He gets Chris Taylor, then Cody Bellinger out swinging, and then A.J. Pollock grounds a ball to Dansby Swanson at shortstop. The first trade of the Braves rebuild. He gloved it. He fired to first, and
There is a new champion of the National League, and it is the Atlanta Braves. They have won the 2021 National League pennant, and the Atlanta Braves are going to the World Series.
the Braves had conquered the Dodgers and were going to the World Series. A night prior to Game 6 of the NLCS, the Astros punched their ticket to the World Series too. The matchup was set. The World Series. The Braves would face one of the most consistent and powerful franchises of the past 5 years or so. A team that fans had made out to be villains after the 2017 cheating scandal. This would be David versus Goliath, and everyone was rooting for the Braves. Some may call that a team of destiny. Before Game 1 of the World Series, Jock Peterson wrote an article for the Players Tribune. He talked about getting traded and thinking about getting traded again, talking intently with his jeweler that he wanted big white pearls and the chemistry that started in the clubhouse. Jock says that while they were leaving for a trip, there were two buses, the position player's bus and the pitcher's bus. Well, he accidentally got onto the pitcher's bus, and after mingling and playing cards for a bit, someone asked him, "Wait, why are you on the pitcher's bus?" "Because y'all are the motherfuckers who are going to win us a World Series." He wasn't wrong. Throughout the entire postseason, the Braves' starting pitching had been very solid, and we just heard what the bullpen did to win the NLCS. Jock ended his letter with a quote that would make all of Braves country run through a wall. Because, yeah, we might not be a super team. We might have only won 88 games. We might have had our share of injuries and slipped below some people's radars and taken an unconventional path to get to this stage. But we also just might be those motherfuckers. And no one has beat us yet. No one had beaten the Braves yet, and they carried that mentality into the World Series. I glossed over this because it wasn't important during the last series, but Jorge Soler was activated off the COVID list and was good to play in the World Series. He would be back in the leadoff spot. It would be Charlie Morton versus Framber Valdez, and honestly, this game was over after the first batter.
Here's one slammed into left field. How about that start to the World Series? Soler will take the trip, and he puts Atlanta up 1-0.
Austin Riley then doubled home a run, and early the Braves dominated Valdez, kicking him out of the game by the second inning. By the third inning, the Braves were up 5-0 as Charlie Morton looked to be on cruise control. But something to mention. In the second inning, Yuli Gurriel hit a ball that ricocheted off of Morton's right leg, and at the time, it looked innocent. Morton flipped the ball over to Freeman at first, and that was that. Well, an inning later, after striking out Jose Altuve on a curveball, Morton fell off the mound in an odd way, and immediately the training staff went out, and Charlie would eventually come out of this game. At the time, no one knew what it could be, but it was most likely something to do with Morton's leg. X-rays revealed a fractured right fibula. He wouldn't pitch again for the rest of the year. Charlie Morton got 3 outs on a broken leg that night. Incredible. The rest of the game was pedestrian, and Atlanta would cruise to a 6-2 victory. Game 2, Max Fried would start, and he had a bad one. The Astros completely flipped the script on the Braves in this one and won by a final of 7-2. The first 2 series in this game were blowouts, and people still thought that this was a series that the Braves would have to scratch out every victory. Flying back to Atlanta for the next week, it was going to be very rainy and wet, and even in Game 3, it was so rough that neither squad could take batting practice, and for the Braves, this wasn't a problem. But Houston, they had never played at Truist, and they also had been playing inside their dome stadium for the past month. Well, whether it be the lack of batting practice or the cold, rainy October weather in Georgia, but Ian Anderson held the Astros in check that night, and with the help of Austin Riley, the Braves held the lead. Through the third, people started to look at the scoreboard and saw a 0 in the hit column for Houston. Ian Anderson was throwing a no-hitter in the World Series, so it was very controversial when Brian Snitker decided to pull Anderson after the 5th inning. But for those who watched Ian that season would know that he wasn't the best going through the order a third time. Plus, the Braves were up just by 1. The dominant bullpen would take over and keep the no-hitter alive until the 8th inning, when ironically Tyler Matzik would enter and give up a bloop base hit. A bummer for sure, but Matzik was able to get out of it. In the bottom of the 8th, Travis d'Arnaud launched a solo shot to deep center field and gave the Braves a little insurance, and in the 9th, Will Smith came on to shut it down. Braves win Game 3 and take a 2-1 series lead. If you've been tuned in whenever Smith has entered the game, you may have noticed that there hasn't been a single bit of the Will Smith experience in this run. Will Smith, who had been a legitimate borderline liability throughout the entirety of the regular season, currently carried a 0.00 ERA in the playoffs. After the game, Matzik was being interviewed by Ken Rosenthal, and when he asked how the bullpen feels being called upon night after night, he said,
"No, boys are all ready. We're all ready down there. Night shift's ready."
The night shift is exactly what you call those guys. They came in, took care of business, closed it out, and of course, like the Pearls and like the rest of the mythos, the night shift would live on. In Game 4, the Braves would look to take a commanding 3-1 series lead, and they would have to work for it because they would go with the option of a bullpen game started by rookie Dylan Lee. Lee had been picked up on waivers from the Marlins this year and barely had any major league experience, and now he was being asked to throw the ball to start a World Series game? It didn't go well. Lee only got 1 out on a strikeout, but otherwise he loaded the bases, and after Yordan Alvarez walked, Snitker walked out to take the ball from Dylan. Warming up at the pen was Kyle Wright. Wright, a former first-round pick, hadn't figured it out. A lot of walks and a lot of hard contact. He was going to be asked to knock down a rally against Houston. He first faced Carlos Correa and got him to ground out, allowing 1 run to score. After that, a strikeout to Kyle Tucker, and Kyle Wright navigated the bases loaded with 1 out, allowing 1 run to score on his part. The Braves down by 1 would have to face off against another future Hall of Famer in Zach Greinke, and he had them figured out. But on the other end of the card, Kyle Wright was doing the same thing for the Astros. Other than a Jose Altuve home run, Kyle was dealing. When his job was finished, Chris Martin relieved him, and it was up to the offense to get going, and they did. It took until the 6th inning and a pitching change to do it, though. Brooks Raley entered, and the Braves saw him quick. After a lineout, Eddie doubled and Freddie walked. Austin Riley would single and bring home Eddie as the Braves would cut the lead in half 2-1. The rally would end there, unfortunately, so the Braves would have to keep on working at it. Matzik came in and did the thing, and in the bottom of the 7th, the Braves would face a new reliever in Christian Javier. And after Adam Duvall struck out, it felt like this was going to be another shutdown inning for the Houston pen. But that wasn't it. Dansby Swanson stood in, and the hometown kid hit a ball to deep right.
I think you're seeing. Here's one into right. Back at the wall. The game is tied. Home run. Swanson. 2-2 in the 7th.
The game was tied with Jorge Soler coming in off the bench to pinch hit for Tyler Matzik, and on a 2-1 count, the Braves went back-to-back.
2-1 pitch. Driven in the air to left. Back at the wall. It is gone. Back-to-back. Braves take the lead. 3-2.
Atlanta had jumped ahead using the long ball, and now the night shift clocked in. The Braves won Game 4 and now had a commanding 3-1 series lead. They would have a chance to win in Atlanta. The spot in the rotation after the bullpen game would have been Morton's previously, but since he was now injured, it would be another bullpen game. Tucker Davidson started and got through the first clean, and in the bottom of the first, the Braves would look to finish this game early. Against Framber Valdez, whom they saw very well in Game 1, they loaded the bases, and Adam Duvall, the fourth outfielder acquired at the deadline and once non-tendered by the Braves an offseason ago, stood in, and on the very first pitch,
Homered off Valdez in Game 1, hits it in the air to right, back at the wall, grand slam! Duvall, 4-0 Atlanta.
Hearing from those who were there, they say that this was the loudest thing that they had ever heard. Truist was shaking, and the Braves were up 4-0. But it wasn't meant to be that night. Over the next few innings, Tucker Davidson unraveled, and by the third, they had a tie game. In the bottom of the third, the Braves would retake the lead on a leadoff home run from Freddie Freeman. The ball traveled 460 feet, which was the furthest home run that Freddie Freeman had ever hit at Truist. Little did anyone know, and it certainly wasn't on anyone's mind at the time, but this was Freddie Freeman's last home run in Atlanta as a Brave. The game would remain 5-4 until A.J. Minter came into the game and had a rare poor outing. 3 would score, and the Astros retook the lead at 7-5, and they wouldn't give it back. The Braves tried to fight off the ropes, but Houston had this game in a stranglehold, and they would lose 9-5. If the Braves wanted to win the World Series, they would have to do it in Houston. As they boarded the plane to head back to Texas, the narrative talk started swirling again. Another 3-1 lead would be blown because Atlanta is truly cursed, but the Braves had 2 games to win 1. That's not a bad place to be. On the morning of November 2nd, 2021, I was a nervous wreck. Before I left for class, I looked at my bedside and grabbed 2 necklaces, both given to me by my dad. One a silver decorative dog tag that read, "However far from home I find myself, just know that my parents would always love me." The other necklace was one of my dad's drum keys. A drum key is a tool that helps tighten the screws on a canvas of a snare. My dad was a drummer. I put them on and wore them throughout the day just as I had been doing the entire postseason. My dad instilled in me my passion for the game, and after he passed in December of 2019, I wanted to continue to honor his love for the game through myself. The last Braves game my dad ever saw was the disappointing 10-run first-inning loss to the Cardinals. He watched to the very end, and I didn't. When I knew that the Braves were going to lose, I went to a friend's house. I left my dad to watch a heartbreaking loss, and I was never going to do that again. Even in 2020, I wore the necklaces, carrying him around with me, and while I was hoping for a win in 2020, as a sign from him, I could tell that it didn't feel right. In 2021, I thought there would be just no signs, but throughout the day, I began to think, this whole season had been a sign. My dad never stopped watching the games, even when the Braves were bad, and no matter how over I thought the season was, I never stopped watching them either. And them being able to succeed with people in the stands, it felt like something clicked. It felt right. Everyone in the Edmondson household was glued to the screen at the first pitch, and Game 6 was underway. Max Fried was set to go against Luis Garcia, and after the Braves went down 1-2-3, I was shocked. This has been a potent top 3 for the Braves, and they had been very good in the postseason, but unfortunately not tonight. In the bottom of the first, everyone was hoping to see Max shove, and last time out, the Astros had gotten to him early, and it looked like they were going to do the same here. Jose Altuve got on with an infield single, and Max looked to bounce back against Michael Brantley. On the third pitch of the sequence, Brantley grounded the ball over to first base, and Freeman looked to make a routine flip to Max covering the bag. Max stepped over and missed the bag. No, he was stepped on. Wait, Brantley missed the bag? When the replay was shown, it showed that Max did miss the bag. However, Brantley stepped on Max. He didn't step on the bag. The umpire thought he did, but he stepped on Max's ankle. Either way, this was a full-force man running and coming down on Fried's ankle, and while everyone in Braves country winced and hoped for the best, Max got up. and he was pissed. The training staff came out and watched him throw a few to make sure he was okay, but Max was stern-faced through it all. He was very mad. It would be Carlos Correa next, and after a first pitch slider for a ball, Max poured on the heat and got Correa on a down and in slider. 1 away. Next up was Alvarez, and Max got a clean ground out. Both runners advanced, and that brought up Yuli Gurriel, and Max, who is not known as a flamethrower, threw 3 straight fastballs, 97, 97, and 98. Gurriel never picked the bat off his shoulder. Fried got out of the inning stranding a pair, but that wasn't Max Fried. This was Maximus Fried. The second would be scoreless, and then in the third, something magical happened. By this point, I was a ball of nerves. I couldn't set down. Ozzie Albies led off the inning with a single to right, and after a line out and a fly out, the Braves looked like they would go down without a whimper again. But Ozzie's singling allowed the lineup to turn over, and Eddie Rosario, who had been seeing the ball well since the NLCS, drew a walk, giving the bat to Jorge Soler. Soler, who had been traded from Kansas City, had tapped into some power in Atlanta, and in this series already had 2 go-ahead home runs, in Game 1 and in Game 4. Here he stood in with 2 on and 2 outs. First pitch, ball, nowhere close. The second, a swing and a miss. Then the third and fourth both missed outside, and he found himself in a great hitter's count 3-1. The fifth was a slider that found the zone for a strike, and the count was full. The next pitch, a slider fouled off to left field. Soler was early. The next, a fastball, another foul. Soler was early again, but he had seen a lot of pitches this at-bat. During this at-bat, I find myself pacing in the kitchen, clutching the necklaces my dad gave me, asking for a sign. Well, we've heard this one before. Tonight, the 8th pitch was magic. Everything stopped. It was one of those moments where things turned to slow motion. My heart sat in the bottom of my stomach, and as the orange rally towels in Houston fell, my heart jumped right back up.
High fly ball to left and goodbye. Soler with a monster blast into left, and the Braves lead 3-0 here in the third.
There they go, pitch on the way. He attacks and smokes one to deep left. This one's going supersonic. That is out of the ballpark. Whoa! Over the train tracks, it's 3-0 Atlanta. And Jorge Soler lands the first punch here in the top of the third inning.
The ball went 446 feet according to the tracker, but this ball went over the train tracks and out of Minute Maid Park. Some say it went minimum 500, and some people like myself believe that it is still orbiting the Earth to this day. It was a 3-run bomb, and the Braves once again in this series had the lead. And celebrating on the field with Soler and the rest of the Braves was Ronald Acuna Jr. He was still with the team and just witnessed the Braves putting the first nail in the Astros' coffin. Not celebrating, however, was Max Fried. He hadn't moved from his spot on the bench. He wasn't on the same plane as everyone that night. There was elation in the household. I compare it to being in shock because I quite literally can't tell you what I was thinking. I can't remember what I did. It was almost an out-of-body experience. There was my sign. After the home run, I sat down and watched. There was still a lot of ball game left. Max pitched shutdown ball in the top of the 5th, and the offense gave him some insurance. Swanson, a 2-run bomb, and Freddie Freeman hitting an RBI double. The Braves were now up 6-0, and it's here I would like to point something out. The total number of runs scored by both teams in this series at this point after the Freeman double was 44. The same number that Hank Aaron wore. Poetry. By the 6th inning, people started getting ready. The locker room was getting tarped, and Max finished a dominant outing. 6 innings of shutout ball. He had put the Braves where they needed to be. In the top of the 7th, the Braves had Rosario, Soler, and Freeman due up. And after the first 2 went down, Freddie sent a slider to center field to make it a 7-0 ball game. The 45th run in this series was done by the man who carried the franchise through the rebuild, and in his final at-bat as an Atlanta Brave, hit a home run to bury the Astros in the World Series. The Braves only needed 2 more pitchers as Tyler Matzik, who had already achieved legend status, went 2 innings. We're in the 9th. Will Smith is on, and just as a cruel joke, he allowed the leadoff man to reach. Correa lined out, then Alvarez flew out to left. 1 more out, and the 2021 Braves would be immortal. A team that lost their franchise icon, the All-Star Game, and their generational star in 1 season, but found a way to come together through stories written by players who never had thought themselves as champions. We're going to be champions. On an 0-2 pitch, Yuli Gurriel grounded a ball to short.
Chopper out to Dansby.
Dansby Swanson, the face of the Braves rebuild, playing for his hometown team, fields it. He thinks about going to second base, to Ozzie Albies, but the timing was off. Then he looks across the diamond. He sees Freddie Freeman, the franchise legend, whose name was spoken in the same breath as Chipper Jones.
Dansby throws to first base.
And the rest is history.
Is this happening? It is! The Atlanta Braves are world champions! The Atlanta Braves have won 2021 World Series in 6 games over the Houston Astros. Pure euphoria down on the field.
The Braves entered the postseason with the least amount of wins as any team in the field and overcame the law firm, a super team, and Goliath. And after 12 years in Atlanta Brave, Freddie Freeman could finally call himself a World Series champion. Jorge Soler would win the World Series MVP for his 3 go-ahead home runs, including the one that has not landed yet. Back at the Edmondson household, I fell to my knees as my friend and my mom both celebrated around me. I couldn't believe it. I could think about nothing but my dad at the moment and thought that he couldn't see this. That his last memory of the Braves was being a first-round failure. But the more I thought and the more I felt the heavy metal hanging around my neck, I felt peace. Somehow I knew that this found its way through the ether and it made it to him. He knew they won, and they won it by overcoming every adversity that was thrown at them. It may be silly to think, but I felt peace. At the trophy ceremony, Brian Snitker, who had been with the Braves since the 70s, got to lift the trophy for his team that he led through the woods to the promised land. Against all odds, the Braves did it. Epilogue. Today, the Braves are seen as the powerhouse of the National League. The only others close are the LA Dodgers, led by Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, and Freddie Freeman. Freeman signed with them following the 2021-2022 MLB lockout. There was confusion and heartbreak that really felt like a breakup, but it seems both parties have found their peace. Unfortunately, a lot of Braves fans see Freddie as a villain, a former family member who went Hollywood, and while I don't agree with this, it certainly leaves a stain on his Braves legacy. As for the rest of the core, they're doing great. Austin Riley and Ozzie Albies are cornerstones, and in 2023, Ronald Acuna Jr. returned fully healthy from his torn ACL and won the National League MVP. The Braves haven't made it past the first round since the World Series, but it takes a lot of special things to make a World Series team. And frankly, it isn't always just talent. It takes luck, grit, chemistry, and maybe some pearls, but most importantly, you have to be those motherfuckers.
What up, Atlanta? Stay humble. And guess what? We are those motherfuckers!
Thank you for tuning in to Against All Odds, Against All Comers, a one-shot podcast about the Braves' improbable run to the 2021 World Series Championship. I've been your host, Eric Edmondson, and I certainly hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a good one. Thank you.